Thanks,
Okay.
Jan.
Welcome everybody to the, I think it's the 11th session of this year's International Communal Studies Association Digital Conference. And this session we will have two papers. We will have one from Orna Shemer and another one from Mitchell Jones. Just a few words. First of all, my name is Jan Martin Bang. I am part of the organizing team of the ICSA. I am talking to you from Norway, where it's getting later and it's quite cold out there. And I'm a permaculture teacher and eco-village designer. I would like to just ask Deborah to say a couple of words. You are going to help us with the technical stuff. I really like it when you wear those headphones. You look so technical. I feel so safe that we're being taken care of. Would you just like to say one or two words from you to the people here?
Well, I'm a Luddite, so you shouldn't feel too safe. But I'll do my best to help you with any problems that might crop up, and that might involve getting Anton, since I won't be able to do much myself. But yeah, you can, when it comes to asking questions, you can raise your hand using the raise hand function, or if you don't know how to do that, you can always write your question in the chat. But we'd like everybody to stay muted unless you're asking a question.
Right. I just want to add that we also have an extra app here. It's an analog app, and raise your hand, you can do this. That actually works quite well because we'll see it. One of us will see it. Right, let's get started. I'm so happy to introduce Orna Shemer for many reasons. We were in previous lives, we were neighbors in neighboring kibbutzim. And Orna is a senior lecturer at the School of Social Work at the Hebrew University. She's also a member of the Yad Tabenkin Research Group, and she's also a member of the ICSA board. And as you're probably all aware, there has been a major crisis incident in Israel for the last few months with many kibbutz communities being totally devastated. And Orna has been working for these last few months, working with the survivors, helping with trauma, helping to rebuild at least their spiritual communities, their social communities. So she is going to read a paper on housing models for people with special needs. And that is something that's very close to my heart because I lived in a Camp Hill community with people with special needs for many years and have written a couple of books about those people. And I'm really, really looking forward to what you're going to say, Orna. So I hand it over to you.
Thank you, Jan. Thank you, Deborah. And excuse me for my English. I will read my lecture. So I'm doing share screen. Every study has a context. The context of the researcher, of the research field, of the research subject. When I submitted the proposal for the conference half a year ago, I lived an ordinary and peaceful life, and I knew that at this point my research on homes for lives in intentional communities would be in the data collection phase. 3.5 months ago, my life and that of my country stopped. We are in a terrible war. and many of us are still struggling with the horrible events of October 7th, as well as with the consequences of the war. Yesterday morning, we met a large group of intentional community researchers in Kibbutz Be'eri, an intentional community of which 10% of its members were brutally murdered and about 25 members of the kibbutz were kidnapped. The visit to the kibbutz shocked all of us, and at the same time also touched about the power that exists within the kibbutz, within the community whose people have a high sense of community, care for each other, and love their life and place. Next to Kibbutz Be'eri is Kibbutz Alumim. Kibbutz Alumim has a home for life, the subject of my research. Kibbutz Alumim was also severely damaged, and people were killed there too. Its residents, like thousands of people from this part of the country, were evacuated from their homes. In the picture, you can see the residents of the Home for Life seen living there in better days. And you can see that the picture is in the place of where was the Nova Party, and where you can see the picture behind me. It's surely, I think it's in the same place. Near those kibbutzim lies the city of Sderot, which has an urban kibbutz, Migvan, which is a unique model of the intentional community. The urban kibbutz has also a home for lives, and the association of the urban kibbutz, Gvanim, has also established a number of houses for young people with disability. I studied their model a few years ago. They too are evacuated from their homes. Some of them return to their families, and some are evacuated together to another place that is not really home. In the first picture, you can see a building damaged by bombs in Sderot, where my daughter lived. She is a student in Sderot. In the second picture, the residents of the houses for life in Gvanim in better days. Although the context of our life has been changed, the research these days is being established again and aims to bring knowledge that presents the add value of the intentional communities for people with disability. The number of kibbutzim that decide to open physically and socially the gates to people who face various challenges in their life, such as youth at risk, people with mental and physical disability, is increasing. The uniqueness of the process is that it is communal and inclusive, strive for integration, and is driven by the desire to enable a different environment for those people. In the lecture, I will present knowledge that I have gained from previous research on the subjects through my own research and of others, and it is especially important for me to hear your experience on the subject from your countries, and also to hear the questions you have about this. I will briefly refer to a number of key points that are the background for understanding this trend of House for Life in Israel. First thing is the rise of a critical discourse from exclusion to inclusion. Through movements of people with disabilities, an activist discourse is embedded that strives for more integration, inclusion, and equal rights for people who experience social exclusion, and usually also the intersections of exclusion process. Like lack of human, usually they feel lack of human rights, lack of access to social resources, and living in poverty, educational gaps, and more. Social theories that deal with critical thinking call for the active involvement of people from those groups. Hence, the discourse of inclusions come both from below, from the people themselves, and from above, from social approaches, social programs, legislation, social discourse. But it seems that it is a long journey, and in fact, many people continue to experience exclusion. The second point is the movement from institutions to the community, the discourse of independent life and nothing about us without us. In the last decades, the deinstitutionalization trend has been expanding, which means the transition from hospitalization institutions to living in the community, while striving for an independent life as possible. The non-institutional movement began to grow with the rights movement of people with disability who protest the norms that was created that people with disability are the other, and therefore they should be sent to institutions away from the eyes of the community, and usually without a horizon to get out of there. The movement for independent life for people with disability has demanded that society change its perception and struggle to develop community solutions that are essentially based on the worldview of ability, motivation, and contribution to society. In Israel, in recent years, several incidents of severe abuse has been discovered in these institutions. Some people even died. It made headlines again and again and raised the public interest in this matter. Along with the claim to move people with disability into the community, there is also a fear from this. Members of movement of people with disability and professionals who are by their side claim that there is a fear that the houses for life in the community in Israel will actually restore in sophisticated ways the control and injustice that exists in institutional housing. In the world, and also in Israel, different models of houses have grown in urban and rural areas, which also for a more independent and communal life than what is available in institutions. What is special about the houses in the kibbutz communities is their physical and social presence in the community space. There allows meeting at community events, visit to families, integration in workplace, informal meeting on the sidewalks, and activities that the members of the kibbutz conduct with the residents of the houses. Hence, both the residents of the house for life and the members of the kibbutz develop a deep dimension of inclusion, which is assimilated as part of their way of life. It is important to note that there are also intentional communities in Israel in which there is almost no connection between the residents of the home for life and the members of the community. The third point is legislation on welfare services for people with disabilities from 2022. The proposal for the law was passed in Israel in July 2022, and the budget for approximately 2.2 billion shekels was allocated for it. Recently, an announcement was made that the work on the implementation of this law has been frozen. The new legislation for equal rights for people with disability deals with their right to choose the way that they will live in their lives. They live their lives. For these modes of life in the community are required, and the law speaks of the right of people with disability to receive welfare services designed to bring about maximization of their capacity for an independent and autonomous life, for equal participation in society, to improve the quality of their lives, and to receive services appropriate to their needs, while giving preference to services in the community, as well as for the purpose of protecting them and maintaining their well-being and safety. The law in Israel is a breakthrough, yet it also receives criticism, for example, for not including the population of people with mental disability and people with medical disabilities, and for continuing the concept of medical disability and not sufficiently implementing more innovative concepts. In relation to the issue of housing, the law is still far from the UN Convention on the equality of persons with disabilities, which declares that the rights of the people to independent housing of their choice in the community. Hence, despite the progress in the new legislation, it arouses criticism and great concern that the houses built in the community will not allow people the choice to live as they wish and to allow every person with a disability to live in their independent home in the community, with the help they need, surrounded by communities that have a system of adapted and accessible services that allow a good life in terms of leisure, employment, accessibility, and more. Those are few pictures from houses for living in kibbutzim, and I will talk briefly about the motivations of the members of the intentional community to build homes for life. Recently, and the number of kibbutzim that establish a home for life for people with disability has been expanding. And this wave is actually started in 2010 in Kibbutz Merav, operated by Kama Association from Kibbutz Harduf. It might, in light of the success of this attempt, Home for Life were established initially in the religious kibbutz and later in kibbutz movement, including in urban kibbutzim. This trend also received encouragement from the Disability Directory of the Ministry of Welfare and Social Security in Israel, which recognizes the advantages of the kibbutz community for this purpose. Currently, more than 35 houses for life are operating in the kibbutzim, and many more are in the process of being established. About 60% of the houses are for women and the rest for men. In most of the houses, the residents are now young people with cognitive development disabilities. There are also homes for people with physical disabilities, for adults, for people on the autistic spectrum, and for teenagers at risk. Although there are homes that the kibbutz operates directly, most of them managed by associations or companies that specialize in this field of disability. It seems that the results are significant not only for the residents of the people in the home for life, but also for the kibbutz itself. The first thing is activism and contribution to society. It's a solution of living in the community that it seems human, social solution and exercising rights. It is a way of life that recognizing the strengths of people with disability or people in risk situation. Alongside this, there is an understanding that the existing solutions that are not in the community are oppressive and patronizing. The second point is the benefits to the members of the intentional community. The Home for Life is experienced as an act of inclusion, which causes certification by its existence. Furthermore, an impact on the social cohesion of the community is felt as a result of the solidarity mission, which is especially important in the regenerating kibbutz as a community that seeks renewed meaning. The third thing is education. Living in a community that has diversity enriches the community. For example, since there are residents from the homes of life who work with children in the kindergarten, the ability to accept those who look different from them develops from the very nature of the daily encounter. And the fourth point is the economic motive. The economic model of the Homes for Life is based on funding from the Ministry of Welfare and Social Security. The actual services are given by NGOs or companies that specialize in working with people with disabilities. Those organizations operate the houses and sometimes employing kibbutz members in management, care, and maintenance. In these ways, Home for Life also has an economic advantage by being a job creator in the kibbutz. and benefits from the workforce of the Home for Life residents with work in the kibbutz. At this point, I would appreciate if you could add from your experience, what models do you know and what advantages do you see in the model for people with who live in houses for life in intentional communities? I will be happy to open it for a discussion, and then I will add few points that I can see. So I'll stop share.
Right, you can signal your, if you want to say something, you just signal it in the appropriate manner. Or you can write it into the chat if you want. It might be something to ask how many people here live or have experienced living in intentional communities. Because there is a difference between living in, I don't know what you call it, general society, and living in intentional communities. There's a great deal of difference. So I can just share for a few minutes a thing in Norway, where I lived in a Camp Hill community for several years. Now, Camp Hill communities in Norway started in the 70s. At that point, people with special needs lived in institutions or away from general society. And they developed over the years, and by the turn of the century, 2000, 24 years ago, there was a trend in the general society that the health authorities wanted people with special needs to integrate into society. This was a great threat to the Camp Hill movement, because we were then considered institutions. And you can understand the dynamics of what's going to happen now. I came in at that point. I moved to Norway at that point, and I studied what we were doing there. We called it social therapy. Now, initially, I thought social therapy is for the people with special needs. They need a therapy. It took me about 6 months to realize it's the other way round. The therapy is for society, because society would not really accept people with special needs because it's not built for it. So what we had to apply was a therapy for society, to change society to be better for people with special needs. And I think that still is true today, that general society is not good for people with special needs. I would add it's not good for a lot of other people too, but especially for them. So that was just my little trying to get a discussion going here.
Thank you.
Gracie, you have to unmute yourself, otherwise we'll never hear you.
Sounds good. Yeah, thanks. Is it Jan? Is that your
Who?
name? Oh, was your name Jan? I didn't catch.
No, my name's Jan.
Oh, Jan, I'm so sorry.
Okay, sorry.
I didn't sleep much last night, but well, yeah, no, I thought that was such a great, well, thank you to both of you. Yeah, and I thought that was such a good point, Jan, that you just said, like, that the therapy was for like society. I haven't lived in intentional community living. I'm making a film with a friend who was for 10 years, but I have an older sister with severe special needs. So I lived with her and my family my whole life. But yeah, I got, yeah, my thoughts, like, and that's so great to see the presentation. I feel like my thoughts go to like how can like the responsibility of care be spread out among more people, because I just feel like that's so essential in integrating people with special needs, especially because, you know, I think there's a wide spectrum of how much need is like needed for different people. Like for my sister, she needs full-time care. Like my mom takes care of her full time, and now that my dad's retired, he can help, but it's very just singular, partly because she doesn't like want other people to help, but you know, it's her whole life now. So sometimes it's hard for me to picture like, yeah, someone with like severe special needs, how that would look. But I think it would be so beautiful, like intentional living, because like I would rather have her live in the future in like intentional community living rather than like current like institutions, you know, just because those can be so isolating. But I think that takes just like another level, because she'll never be independent, right? Like she can't feed herself or go to the bathroom by herself. So the aspirations to be like independent living just is never going to happen for her or other people, but definitely can have like better ways of life. But yeah, so I don't know, no, not really like a question, just like a thought. My mind always goes to like someone like that who needs just like almost 24-hour care, what that would kind of like look like. But I just feel like if there's more than one person who's willing to give that care, then it can be doable. But yeah.
Okay, thank you. Cheryl, you raised your hand.
I did. My
Yeah.
question for Orna was, and Jan made me think of this, was has Campbell been an influence on these communities in Israel, or is there any connection between Campbell and these communities?
Mhm.
Oh, it's a whole
Maybe
session.
Jan will answer because he has two legs, one in Camp Hill there, and he have one leg in Israel. So, but I'm not sure. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I'm the connection. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. There's lots of connections, but they're not immediately visible on the surface. And I would really have to go into a whole lot of stuff about the history of kibbutz and the history of Camp Hill, but there are deep connections, but not visibly direct ones very much.
Okay, thank you.
In Camp Hill, the people with disability live with families in their houses, right, Jan?
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
in Israel, in the kibbutzim in Israel, they live in their own house. They have a house for 6 people or 10 people together, and the house is in the kibbutz like other houses. So it's not the same. But maybe the spirit of the inclusive spirit is more the same.
Yeah, it's a question of motivation. I can say something about this because I was a kibbutz member for many years. While I was a kibbutz member, I got a free year and went to live in Camp Hill for a year. And when we came back, the kibbutz was very interested because they said, "Hey, you know, maybe we can make money opening a house on the kibbutz like this." And I remember talking to my wife about this, and we in the end advised the kibbutz not to, because there's a question of motivation here. And if your motivation is to make money, your enterprise will assume a different form than if your motivation is to give a service. Now, I'm not saying that giving a service, you should not make money. You obviously have to pay your bills. But the reason why you're working there is because you want to give a service. And making money is just because you need to keep the show on the road and pay your wages and pay your rent and pay for electricity. But if your motive is, hey, can we make money from this? Then I would say definitely do not work with people with special needs. And I think it's a subtle thing. It sounds a bit rough, really, but I think it's very, very important. It's a really important issue because you're very close to those people, and you might think, you know, they're not very clever, but they're very clever. They have amazing social skills that you wouldn't even guess at, and they'll see through you the moment you reveal, you know, they'll see that you want to do this for money and not for them. Yeah.
Right.
Anyway, we got a bit off track there. We are ending. This is really morphed into the discussion.
Okay, I have one, just I want to share one more
Yeah. Please.
thing, okay? I just want to add that the benefits of integration in the intentional communities that I see from the research that I done. I also done one research with Dr. Menachem Topol, who is here. And I've done research in Sderot, in Gvanim. And from there is not a lot of research about this aspects in Israel, but what we can learn is that the benefits are the community and the sense of community, the way people feel the organic integration and the sense of reciprocity between the residents and the people from the kibbutz. Also, the community infrastructures that provide housing and employment, leisure, and everything. We had a lot of place in the kibbutzim where people can really have good life there. Also, the connection to the intention of the intentional community. I talked about it before. The intention to, Jan say, to give service, but to be with to be inclusive and to find really a new intention for the renewed kibbutz. It's very important now. Experiencing community life and expanding the concept of home. This is for the people with this with disability to understand the perspective of home. That home can be also not just the place of home, but all the yard around them and all the kibbutz. When we talk with people with disability, they talk about the physical spaces that they enjoy to go around and to be with the people and with everything that happened around the house. Also, it's an alternative to social services that offer an institutional solutions, of course. And the last thing is the sustainable permanent arrangement, because this is a house for life. And people really, in most of the kibbutzim, they will live a lot of years in those houses, and and the community will be their community. And I will end with one quote from when we ask a woman with a disability who live in one of the kibbutzim, what is your message to the kibbutz? She said that the kibbutz knew that we love them as such as they love us, that we care about them, and that we enjoy being here. We are part of this family of the kibbutz, and it's not just that we felt like coming and living here and settling here for nothing, but we have a goal to live here peacefully, happily, and with pleasure, and that there are many things here that are fun and that are done for our sake, and that we will have a good time here, and that we will feel we belong, and that we will be accepted as the family, accepted us as we are. Even though we are different from each other, it does not mean that you are not equal and you are not loved. So Jan said that they are so clever, and really I think it's the most important things that I want to say it in my lecture. And we try in the research, and in the research I will start now, I will try to hear the voices of the people who live in the houses and to understand from their perspective what they need, what they find in the kibbutz, and what they want. And I hope also to learn from another other model from around the world. So I will hope that I will have the strength in the next months to do this and really to compare and to understand more in a more wide perspective this trend of houses in the community. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Orna. Thank you for a wonderful presentation. There's just one thing you forgot to mention, which I'm going to add to for that you can put into your research before we open up for a general discussion. And you mentioned the benefits to the community. I would say the important thing is the benefits to the children of the community. People with special needs are often very obvious. They're very visible. They've got Down syndrome. They walk funny. They look funny. And often we're shielded from that. We don't know that. Our children don't grow up with them. So I want to tell you a story. We lived in Camp Hill for a year when our oldest son, Jake, was 6 years old. And we came back to kibbutz after a year, and Ruth, that's my wife, took him up to Jerusalem to do some shopping or something. On the bus up there was a person with Down syndrome. And Jake turned to Ruth and said, "Look, there's somebody over there who's Norwegian." And the amazing thing is that I grew up, I didn't know, I never hung out with people with Down syndrome. And I started working with them as a summer job when I was about in my mid-20s, late 20s. And I was actually a bit apprehensive about working with people with special needs. And the fact of children growing up with people who are other and not experience them as other is immensely important for our children. So that's something you can put into the next presentation you give on this one. The importance for children in an intentional community who grow up as neighbors and friends and playmates, maybe, to people with special needs. But let's open up for a discussion, because we really want to make this last few minutes for questions or comments or any other inputs you have. So you can do your usual thing, wave hands or whatever, chat. But I see we have a chat here.
I had another question for Orna.
Yeah, great. Yeah, go for it, Gracie.
Yeah. In this community, was there like were there like nurses there? Or was there like any like special skills of people that you noted needed to like be there for people with disabilities?
Nurses, you mean by medical assistants?
Yeah, I was just curious if like there was anything that you noticed was like, was needed specifically for people with disabilities that you would need to kind of make sure was present. But I don't know if that's a clear question, but
in most of the kibbutzim there is a medical yes, there is help, there is a medical assistance, but it's not in the house. But most of the people that are in a house for life can live independent. They don't need for their daily life nurses. But I know about one house where there are old people with disabilities, and some have someone near them that help them all the time. And it's a personal help.
Orna, I'm glad you mentioned older people because I was curious about older people in the kibbutz and if you've seen good models in the kibbutzim of caring for older people with dementia, or if not, maybe just older people that have a lot of mobility impairments and can't live independently.
I'm not sure I understand. And I don't hear you so well, so.
Oh, sorry. Let's see.
Yeah.
I was curious if you've seen good models in Israel of caring for older people, in particular, older people with dementia, or older people with, serious mobility impairments who can't live independently.
Yeah. First of all, the Home for Life, when I'm talking about Homes for Life, I'm talking with, it's for people with disability, okay, with special needs. And if I understand you right, you ask about the old people. So I think the kibbutz is the best place for old people and for children. But for old people, because we have houses and usually in all kibbutzim, people who are getting old have Manolo, how you say by COD? We have a house for the old people, okay, that they can live there together, and some of them just live in their houses. The model is that they're in their houses, but they have a personal help, and they have someone from the kibbutz that manage and look and accompany their life, but they live in an independent way in their homes. And in other kibbutzim, there is a home for the older that they, if they're in severe medical, so they can live there. I think the kibbutz is a safe place for older people, but it's not the model for what we mean by home for life.
Okay.
Manolo, you
you
are
have to unmute.
mute. Manolo,
Manolo, you have to switch on your microphone.
There are also kibbutzim, some cases, when the home for life was initiated from one kibbutz member that have a son with some kind of problems, and begin the idea of the home for life for other people also.
Okay. Thank you, Manoli. Yes, I think that's something that people who don't know about kibbutz, it is a very caring society. It looks after people, and as people's needs change over lifetime, the youngest members, not members, but the youngest people living there, babies, have lots of special needs and have to be looked after. And then there's a period, like you say, in the middle there where we're working all the time. And then when you get older, you start having more needs that need to be met. and the kibbutz has 100 years plus of experience of making sure that happens. I think we have to wind up now this particular thing because Mitchell, sorry, Mitchell is straining at in the slips, as they said, to give his presentation. Orna, I want to thank you so much. For me personally, this was so wonderful, just to be with you, but also to hear what you had to say. And it's something that I will certainly, next time I'm in Israel, make sure that I follow up and visit and see and experience. So thank you very much.
Thank you. And I also want to thank Deborah. You helped me so much. You sent me a bibliography and they helped me to find also modules in iOS. So thank you. Everything stopped because of the war, but I will return to this and thank you so much for this.
Good.
I appreciate
So
it.
it's always fun. So now we've been looking kind of into the future, like how can we build these societies? But always when you look into the future, you must always have a rear view mirror. You must see what happened in the past. And so our next contribution is from Mitchell Jones, and he's going to tell us about a community that, well, I would say it started 300 years ago. And this is going to be very exciting because it's a community that has a long history and ended up as a very interesting place in Iowa called Amana, which I personally had a very big inspiration when I went there, thinking I was going to come to the end of a community. And I realized that actually there is a special spirit in communities, and it inspired me to write a book about communities. So Mitchell, you're a public health worker and a historian, and you have been writing about communities inspired by Charles Fourier, and really one of the heydays, one of the most exciting periods of intentional community history, which was in the United States, North America, in the 19th century. It says here that you're a member of a growing Christian atheist movement, and I love it.
That's an old bio, actually. I'm no longer a public health worker, and I'm also a member of the Unity School of Christianity, no longer a Christian atheist. So, so I think that's maybe last conference's bio there.
Okay, so anyway, I love people who cross boundaries. So I'll put it up to you. And do you want to share screen?
Yes.
Okay.
All right. So oops. Go. So beginning. I have to go back to the beginning. Okay, so since I presented this last, so the Eben-Ezer community of the community of true inspiration was in what's today West Seneca, New York, which is very close to where I work and go to school at University at Buffalo. So I'm going to be showing a video later on of some of the sites in West Seneca today. But I presented this paper at the Communal Studies Conference in the United States in New Harmony, Indiana in October to a group of, to several practicing inspirationists. And also I should acknowledge Peter Hanley, who is an inspirationist scholar who also helped me somewhat with the sources for this piece. But some of the feedback that I got was that the inspirationist scholars have their own, view, sort of an emic, insider's view. But since I, work close to Buffalo and I'm not an inspirationist myself, they were wondering if I could add a little bit more of an edict or outsider's view to things. So I've kind of shifted my focus on this a little bit. Jan mentioned, the inspirationists have a long history, and I'll give a little bit of that background just by way of introducing them to those who don't know. But I'm really zooming in on what their leader Christian Metz called the long and anxious period of waiting in their journey from the independent German state of Hessen to the United States, and then their settlement on the Buffalo Creek Indian Reservation that had belonged to the Seneca. So Eben-Ezer was both a stone of help, that's what Eben-Ezer means after 1 Samuel 7:2, but also a test of faith for the community of true inspiration. And as I say, Metz called it this long and anxious period of waiting. But by way of introduction, the Community of True Inspiration was a radical Pietist communal religion founded in 1714. Their founders were Eberhard Ludwig Gruber and the first Werkzeug, or tool of God, Joseph Friedrich Rock. And Werkzeugs, they believed, had the ability to communicate directly with God and act as God's mouthpieces here on earth. And so they, because of their sort of separatist views, they were opposed to the Lutheran Church and therefore opposed to really the broader society that was dominated by Lutheranism. They were outcast throughout Europe, so they traveled all around Netherlands, Germany, and all throughout Central Europe, but eventually started this process of consolidation in Hessen, which had a more liberal government than around them. So when they consolidated in Hessen, they actually went into a period of decline until in the 1820s, the new Werkzeug Christian Metz started to receive divine inspirations, and he led a revival of the Inspirationist movement. So the Inspirationist movement grew during this time, and they were able to lease several estates in Hessen and lived in a sort of limited communal form there, which was all well and good until the revolutions of 1830. This was a series of revolutions that swept throughout Europe. But as part of this, Upper Hessen had erupted in rebellion. The Grand Duchy of Hessen and his brother, Prince Emil, were desperate to maintain power after this uprising, and so they took measures to consolidate power, which meant cracking down on groups that were seen as resistant to that. The Inspirationists were one of those groups because of their refusal to send their children to Lutheran schools, to pay taxes to Lutheran churches, and especially their refusal to perform military service. So the Grand Duchy removed the Inspirationist citizenship rights in Hessen, which led them to have to seek another home elsewhere. In 1842, Christian Metz received a divine inspiration where God told him to form a committee of elders to go to America to explore property and places that they could settle there, because America was seen as a land of religious freedom. So this group set sail on September 18th, 1842, and arrived in New York Harbor on October 25th. The ship they went on was called the New York, aptly named because that's where it arrived. The captain was a German captain, Captain Watcher. And when he heard that the group was looking for land, Captain Watcher introduced them to a land agent and interpreter named Philip Dorsheimer, who took the group to the Buffalo Creek Reservation and also to another property near Lake Chautauqua in New York. The group was especially impressed by the Buffalo Creek site, though. The site had abundant timber. A sawmill had been built by the Seneca Indians there that was still in operation. And there were many homes that had been built by the Indians and other improvements to the land. And it was very close to Buffalo also, and markets in Buffalo. So that was a potential lucrative source to sell timber actually to the Buffalo market. The area was known, the area where they originally went and started to settle on the Buffalo Creek Reservation was known as Jack Berry Town, after a Seneca chief, Jack Berry, who had settled there after the Revolutionary War. The elders initially sent an offer to the Ogden Land Company that they refused because it was too low. And then Metz eventually actually had to travel back to New York City to talk to the Ogden brothers, Thomas and David, and other investors. And finally, all parties agreed to a total of $41,000, which is worth about $1.6 million US today. And this was to be paid in graduated payments by January 1844. The first $3,000 of these payments was to be put in a trust and used to buy out the Indian claims. However, there was a clause in the agreement, or in the treaty, that if 9/10 of the natives did not agree to sell out to the Ogden Company, the company would refund $3,000 to the inspirationists and the contract would be nullified. Now, this was an act of deception on the part of the Ogden Land Company. They knew that it was legally impossible to coerce the Seneca into leaving the land. They also knew it would be nearly impossible for the inspirationists to settle back in Hessen once beginning settling Buffalo Creek. So here's where we get to the Seneca side of the story. The Buffalo Creek Reservation was established in 1797 by the Treaty of Big Tree. The Seneca had supported the Loyalists during the Revolutionary War, and so after the revolutionaries won, the victors moved to conquer the Seneca lands. Merchant and superintendents of finance for the Revolution, Robert Morris, sold preemptive purchase rights to the Holland Land Company, who agreed to pay once Morris secured the legal right to clear the Seneca from the land. The Treaty of Big Tree compelled the Seneca to sell all of their land west of the Genesee River except for 12 tracts of land, one of which was the Buffalo Creek tract. Another treaty in 1838, known as the Treaty with the New York Indians of 1838, or the Second Treaty of Buffalo Creek, followed the President Andrew Jackson's Indian Removal Act of 1830 and coincided with the goals of the Indian removal policy, which I think there was a Whig president already at that point, but that was basically a bipartisan consensus in Washington. The Second Treaty of Buffalo Creek ceded the 4 remaining Seneca reservations, including the Buffalo Creek Reservation, to the Ogden Land Company. The preamble to the treaty makes it sound like they were taking the land for noble reasons. The Indians really wanted to relocate to Wisconsin to be with their Menominee friends. However, Quaker observers who acted as advocates for the Seneca told a very different story. And I'll read from a report by the Society of Friends on their work with the Seneca Indians. A scene now opened, perhaps unprecedented in the annals of treaty making. Runners were hired to scour the forests and bring in every chief who could be prevailed upon by means fair or foul to sign the assent. Day and night, their wigwams were invaded for this purpose. They were waked from their sleep, besieged by day when pursuing their business, chased down and attempting to escape from importunity, or forced to stay from their homes to avoid it. Spirituous liquors were employed to intoxicate them, false representations to deceive them, threats to intimidate them, and vain hopes to allure them. Ultimately, the Quakers charged that only 16 out of 81 Seneca chiefs assented to the treaty. Whig politician Eldridge G. Spalding found some truth in the Quakers' report. He also wrote a report, which he submitted to the Congressional Committee on Indian Affairs, urging them to take the matter up again. They did with the Treaty of the Seneca of 1842, also known as the Third Treaty of Buffalo Creek or Compromise Treaty of 1842. This acknowledged that the Ogden Land Company had purchased the Buffalo Creek and Tonawanda reservations, but it returned the Allegheny and Cattaraugus reservations to the Seneca. Article 5 of the treaty said that the Indians improved land, including the building of houses, barns, and fences, and the clearing of farmlands, were not compelled to sell their land for 2 years from the ratification of the treaty. So that meant that the Ogden Company sold the land to the Inspirationists with the understanding that they would be able to immediately settle on the extant buildings, when in fact the Ogden Land Company had no power to compel the Seneca who dwelt on the improved land to migrate until 1844, 2 years later. Senecas then attempted to use their legal standing to evict the settlers. When a land agent confiscated timber from some Senecas that some Senecas had cut to sell in Buffalo, they complained to the police. That land agent was Fellows, who will come into play in a minute. The police arrested Inspirationist elder Willem Noe while he was working and detained him in Buffalo. An 1821 law had made it illegal for non-Indians to reside on reservation lands. So without a deed, which the Ogden Land Company was unable to provide, the Inspirationists were in violation of this law. The Seneca chiefs enlisted Stephen Osborne as their agent to represent them, and through Osborne, the chiefs invited the Inspirationist elders to meet at the Indian Church in Jack Berrytown. It's kind of an interesting scene. They had to have 2 interpreters to communicate. One interpreter translated Seneca into English. The other translated English into German. A peace treaty was made, and they agreed to coexist with the European colonists for 1 year in exchange for a payment of $600 from the Inspirationist elders. Christian Metz said, despite their problems, they still had peaceful relations, but their peaceful coexistence was tenuous. On May 1st, 1844, the chiefs met and decided that since the 1-year term on the treaty was up, and according to the treaty, they had, quote, agreed to remove from off the reservation, which we expect you may be disposed to comply with. When the Eben-Ezer elders replied that they did not intend to vacate and that the title actually had passed from the Seneca to Ogden and Fellows, the Seneca chiefs requested to counsel with the elders in person. The following day, Metz and Mayer, another elder, met with the group of chiefs. The chiefs were accompanied by a lawyer from Aurora, New York, who advised them to drive the Inspirationists from the reservation, and the lawyers would defend them from any legal consequences that action might incur. The chiefs informed the elders of their intention to drive them from the land, and the elders promised to reply by May 4th. George W. Clinton, son of former New York Governor DeWitt Clinton, was the lawyer for the Seneca. He argued that there may be grounds to overturn the treaty, and also exhorted that the Indians do not use hasty measures against the Germans. These were comparatively innocent. They had only to do with the Ogden Company. Clinton also pointed out that the company had promised in a letter on February 15th, 1844, that the Germans would pay the Indians for their improvement at a price not to exceed $1.50 per acre. On Clinton's recommendations, the chiefs determined to evict the Germans, beginning with Inspirationist elder Charles Mayer. If they were successful, they would move to evict the rest of the colonists. Judge Nathan K. Hall heard the eviction proceedings against Mayor and Erie County Court of Common Pleas and found that whatever may have been, here's a quote, the means used or however much the Indians may have been wronged in the negotiations of these treaties, I cannot, especially in the absence of all evidence of fraud, doubt for a moment that these treaties are binding so far as this application is concerned. And so since the treaties of 1838 and 42 were valid, the Seneca's national right is gone. And if the individual Indian chooses to make a bargain with Ogden and Fellows and surrender his possession, the nation has no right to complain. Most of the remaining Seneca on the Buffalo Creek domain sold their improvements and left, but a few did refuse to be driven out. They continued to cut timber and peel bark for tanning on the land. On October 1st, 1844, Inspirationists sent a letter addressed to 13 Seneca chiefs, informing them that they no longer had timber rights to the forest and were not allowed to trespass. The elders invited the chiefs to council at Middle Eben-Ezer on August 6, 1844. Mayor read an address in English while an interpreter translated it into Seneca, recounting the group's persecution in Europe and apologizing for their ignorance of the injustice and fraud perpetrated against the Seneca. A Seneca spoke up and said that just as their faith in God had led them to this land, so too did the Seneca believe the Great Spirit gave them this land to be stalwarts of as long as they could. Several days later, a committee of Seneca approached the Inspirationists saying they had agreed to abandon Buffalo Creek. However, there was still another group for whom Inspirationists pleas had no purchase. This group extracted as much timber and bark as they could from the forest before marching through Middle Eben-Ezer with their hatchets, damaging Inspirationist property in June of 1845. As a result of a complaint by the Inspirationists, the group was indicted by a grand jury, but settled the matter outside of court. The Indians and Inspirationists reached an agreement on July 9th, 1845, that the Indians would not trespass on the Eben-Ezer track so long as the Inspirationists withdrew their complaint from court. By 1846, the last of the Seneca had left the Buffalo Creek. Eben-Ezer thrived as a community until they outgrew it in 1855 and moved to Amana, Iowa, as Jan mentioned. Local legends, now I haven't been able to find any documentation for this, but in conversation with the West Seneca historian and some of the Haudenosaunee historians that he's talked to, local legend says that the reason for their move to Iowa may have been because the Seneca had friendly relations with the Meskwaki, on whose land Amana still resides today, and the Inspirationists were able to maintain friendly relationships with the Seneca. After they moved to Amana, for the most part, the Meskwaki and the Inspirationists coexisted peacefully and cooperatively. The Meskwaki canoed down the Iowa River to trade with the communal kitchens and to harvest lotuses at Lily Lake in Amana. Amana blankets were used as part of Meskwaki burial ceremonies. And their interactions continued for about 70 years. So in conclusion, before I move on to the video, Eben-Ezer was an intentional community escaping persecution in Europe. They came to the United States, a promised land of religious freedom, but their dreams of communal spiritual utopia came up against a land claim by the people that had already lived there for centuries. The Inspirationist utopian goals happened to coincide with the goals of the post-Jacksonian government. They wanted to remove the people that already lived there and replace them with a European population. The Inspirationists thus, despite goodwill and best intentions, became the tools of a larger program that was out of their control. The Inspirationists had to live and try to coexist with the Seneca through this whole tense time. Luckily, the spiritual faith of both groups largely helped them avoid violence. However, both groups were at the forefront of a struggle over which neither party had full control. The individuals at Berrytown, Eben-Ezer, and later West Seneca coexisted under conditions imposed on them by forces much larger than what was happening there at Buffalo Creek. And so here is a video that I made of some of the historic sites in the Eben-Ezer today, the town of West Seneca.
Hello, I am here at the West Seneca Historical Society here, and this was also known as the town of, I think this was Middle Eben-Ezer, but I'll have to figure that out. This building was one of the Eben-Ezer buildings, but it was actually moved here in the 50s. But the Eben-Ezer, so there were three actually Eben-Ezer communities, Upper Eben-Ezer, Lower Eben-Ezer, and Middle Eben-Ezer. They're not all part of the town of West Seneca, but you can see the historical marker over my shoulder here. So Eben-Ezer was the first community in the United States of the community of true inspiration. A lot of the Eben-Ezer buildings are today private residences and have been remodeled, but one of the most recognizable as a 19th century building is the Holy Helpers Church on Indian Church Road in West Seneca. And this was actually Middle Eben-Ezer. And as you can see on the side, the site of the original Middle Eben-Ezer Memorial Church built on handmade bricks. Christian Metz held first church service in March 1846. When Eben-Ezer Society moved to Iowa in 1864, property was bought by 14 Holy Helpers Church congregation and altered to meet their requirements. Walls of the apse of present church are the original Eben-Ezer church walls. So here you can see the Eben-Ezer church walls, and we'll go towards the front, and you can see the mosaic and the Catholic art that the 14 Holy Helpers. So here's the front of the church. You can see clearly the mosaic and everything is in a Catholic style, very different than the Eben-Ezer's more simple meeting houses. But so this was a church that was used by the Eben-Ezer inspiration. This is the Lower Eben-Ezer Cemetery. As you can see, there's a whole section here that's unmarked. The Eben-Ezer graves are not marked, but there are some other graves here that have German names. So it's pretty clear that after the inspirationists left in 1855, that Germans did continue to settle and live in this area. I think in part because, there were already German-speaking people here. This is where the cabin of Calcutta was. And this was a famous case. Actually, there's a book called Seneca Spirits about witchcraft. It talks about this landmark case. Tommy Jemmy was a Seneca chief that executed Calcutta for witchcraft. And according to legend, the Eben-Ezers, they settled some of the Indian-built cabins on the Buffalo Creek Reservation. And according to legend, a few of the Eben-Ezer inspirationists saw a ghost of the witch Calcutta and asked Christian Metz if they could move to a different cabin. I wasn't able to find any information on that in my research in Christian Metz's diary or in Gottlieb Schooner's history, but it is sort of a local legend, and so that's why there's the marker for folklore and legends here. Now here is the actual Eben-Ezer Cemetery section of the Lower Eben-Ezer Cemetery. And as you can see, it does have the names marked here, but there are not any marked graves in this section. And then actually back here somewhere is where the Calcutta's cabin was said to be. All right, so here we are at the edge of the Buffalo Creek at the site of the Christian Metz home. You can see an old mill. Actually, maybe you can barely see the rooftop over there, but that was also an Eben-Ezer building. Let's go up to the front of the building here. There's one of the original millstones from the Eben-Ezer mill. And here's the Christian Metz house. As I said, a lot of the inspirationists moved into cabins that already existed on the Buffalo Creek Reservation built by Indians. So initially, Metz did live in a cabin built by Indians. But so this is his home here. These are also Eben-Ezer buildings on the rest of this street here too as well. So Christian Metz lived here. This building was erected in 1840. was the home of George Gannett, operator of the Indian Sawmill, and then later Christian Metz, leader of the Eben-Ezer Society, occupied this house. And our final stop on our tour of the Eben-Ezer settlement is here in the Middle Eben-Ezer Cemetery. Today, this is part of a public park right across the street from the Metz home. The Metz home actually, by the way, is being considered for revision and becoming a museum. Jim Pace, the West Seneca historian, is working on that. Everything. As you can see, this cemetery is also unmarked, pretty overgrown here in the forest. It's been sort of allowed to become a natural open space here. But you can't see here are some names. These are the names of the folks buried here at the Middle Eben-Ezer Cemetery.
All right, that's it. You're muted, Jan.
Trying to now you can hear me. Now I can start telling jokes again. Thank you so much for that presentation. We have 10 to 15 minutes left, so the floor is open for anybody who would like to make a comment, ask a question, or tell a story. Do we have any descendants of the Amana, the inspirationists here, or of the Senecans, maybe?
I don't think so, but Cheryl has a question.
Cheryl, yep. You have to unmute yourself.
Yeah, I did. Thanks,
Good.
Mitch. I really enjoyed that. I don't have any questions because I think you did a great job of presenting the information. I just wanted to say I really appreciate you bringing this aspect of Amana history or inspirationist history forward. Is this something that you're planning to pursue more research on?
Yeah, I'm still looking through more sources. So there was a local historian, Frank Landkees, who was he did a lot of work on West Seneca history. He was actually like a construction worker. He wasn't even a professional historian, really. But he also did a lot of work on Buffalo Creek Reservation and Eben-Ezer. So I'm kind of tracking down some of his footnotes and looking for more primary source documents. But I'm trying to get I'm trying to do sort of like a Rashomon thing where I tell this story from different angles, different points of view.
So is this what you're thinking of doing for your dissertation?
Oh, no, this is just for an article. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments here? If not, I made a couple of notes here of things that inspired me. And having a background of kibbutz history in my baggage, I see very much that there is a parallel here, and it's a parallel of people who come to other people's land and settle it. And we know that the overall history of North America has some very dark sides to it. And I really appreciated you presenting this because it seemed to me that we have here this exact same thing. People come to settle. They are inspired by higher ideals. The people who live there feel that they have a strong bond to the land that they are living in. And I understood from your presentation that there was conflict, but there was also a peaceful resolution. And I hope I understood it right, but one of the reasons why the Amana was settled in Iowa because there was a connection between the Seneca and the local indigenous people in that part of Iowa. which is interesting because we often think that the indigenous people in North America were not people who traveled a lot, but actually they did have a lot of connections. And it seems to me that this conflict was in the end resolved peacefully. And so I had this thing going through my head at the end of your presentation that I was just so wishing that the inspirationists could be an inspiration for other conflicts similar to that. That, you know, if we could sit and talk and respect each other's commitments to higher powers, to ideals, to bonding to the land, if we could sit and talk that through, maybe we could also find peaceful resolutions. So I really thank you for bringing that into my thoughts, because we so sorely need that. Cheryl, are you wanting to come back on that one?
Can I respond to that?
Yes, sure. Yes, sorry.
So what I found remarkable about this story too is that through all this, they were living together and living next to each other and in each other's midst. And so it must have been a tense situation with all this legal stuff going on and everything, and sort of the question of you know, what's the fate of this community going to be. But at the same time, they were able to deal with each other, and even with the language barrier, were able to deal with each other as human beings and coexist.
Yeah. Thank you. Cheryl, you want us to say something?
Yeah, I just wanted to comment kind of on what both of you have said, and that is that there were a number of communities in the 19th century, utopian communities, that had good relationships with the indigenous people that lived by. And part of that was that they were also othered by the surrounding community. Part of it was that they weren't evangelical, even if they were religious. So they weren't trying to convert the local indigenous people, unlike many of the colonists that were not intentional communities. And part of it was just that they were pacifist. And so their approach to how they entered negotiations and their relationship with the indigenous people was very different than the more colonizing types of communities, even though they were living on indigenous land or land that had recently been taken from them. They weren't there as colonizers.
It's
Right.
a lot of it has been done on the Moravian missions in, you know, going back to, you know, the 17th and 18th centuries, and how different the Moravian approach to the indigenous North Americans was versus like Puritans and other groups like that.
Right. Thank you. Well, the last word goes to you. Actually, it goes to me, but before it goes to me, it goes back to you, Mitchell. Do you want to round this off? Do you have any last things you want to say? I see.
Well, just that you know, the Eben-Ezer, you know, it didn't last for all that long until you know, about the 1850s, but it didn't die out because of lack of success. In fact, the reason that they moved to Iowa was because they were so successful. So I think a lot of times when people look at these 19th century communal groups, they think of them as you know, existing for a little time and then totally failing. Well, that was not the case here. They were incredibly successful and still are to this day. Amana Colonies is a tourist attraction in Iowa, and actually recently Xi Jinping was brought there. as part of a diplomatic visit. So.
Right. Thank you. Christopher Sims has just joined us. Do you have a very short question, Christopher, that you would like to put? If you do, we would like to see you, and you will have to unmute yourself.
Oh, thank you. Appreciate the ability to ask my question. It was just a thought. I once lived in Fairhope, Alabama, and from what I understand, Fairhope, Alabama was founded by a group of white folk, but I'm not sure how long ago, I forget when, but I'm wondering if they had the same type of experience that the gentleman explained in his presentation.
Okay, Mitchell, you were nodding. Does that mean you have a very short answer?
Well, I believe Fairhope was a Georgia's community, right? They is that a different Fairhope that I'm thinking? They were
has an
single
input on this, I
tax. Yeah, single tax on land, I think, was that. So Henry George would, yeah. So Henry George, his sort of solution to everything was that, you know, you have this single tax on land use, that nobody should own the land that you should pay, you know, to the greater community for use of the land. But beyond that, a lot of people were attracted to Georgism because it was a fairly simple program, and you could add on to that whatever you wanted. So there were a lot of anarchists, arts and crafts movement type people. The Scott Nearing was part of a Georgist community for a while. So it was something that attracted a lot of different types of people. The community of true inspiration is more of a sort of, I hate to say closed, but more sort of closed ranks ideologically. They you know, so they're all part of the same religion, you know, whereas Georgism was more of an open system.
Okay, I'm gonna wind this up now. Thank you so much for your inputs. And it just shows that when you open the box of history, you never know what comes pouring out, and it's hard to close it. But it is getting late, and we have one more session. Deborah, would you like to end off by saying what you just wrote so that everybody just understands that we would like some feedback?
Yes, I'd be glad to. In the chat, I have posted 2 links. One is a link to our donations page. If you feel moved to give us a donation, we would certainly welcome it. We would also welcome your feedback about the conference, and we have a short survey that we would love if you would fill out. And I have put the link to the survey as well in the chat.
Great. Okay, so this will be recorded, and it will be up in a few days on the website, and you can go and see the film of Eben-Ezer again, and hear the discussion. I want to thank Orna for your input on this session, and Mitchell for your input, and for you others also for your inputs and your attention, and wish you a good break. And we do have one more session in this conference, which all I know about is that we're going to do poetry, because that's where I'm going to go in a few minutes and be part of. So I hope we meet again at some other thing. And don't forget, in a year and a half from now, we can all meet over a glass of wine in Lisbon. Okay, I'm going to stop the recording.
Thank you, Jan. Thank you, Jan.
Thank you.